So I thought I would tell you this will be my last video because I got to get out of here pretty soon. But I thought I'd tell you about the heart attack incident. Now, I did not have a what you would call a typical heart attack. Like I didn't arrest, okay, or I didn't have a AFib or something like that. What I had was a little different. However, it is serious and can kill you. And apparently, I was having a pretty bad episode that night. Um, so, what I had is called Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. Cardiomyopathy. Now, some people pronounce it differently. Whatever. This is how I was taught to do it. And I'm getting tired of people jumping me on how I spell it and how I say it, and I'm like, just you know what it is. Get off it. So anyway, that's what I had. And this is a heart condition that happens. They're starting to call it a mental health condition, and I'm like, but it's a heart condition. And the reason they're calling it a mental health condition is it often comes from stress and grief. And, but, you know, I despise the mental health system. And I despise the way they label things, the way they label people, the way they do things. I hate the whole deal. So it's not that I don't want people to be better emotionally. That's not true. It's just that it just needs a total overhaul, everything, and they need to lose all the labels. Flush those down the toilet, flush the drugs down the toilet, and I don't believe in the medical concept of it. So anyway, there's a lot I don't believe in the mental health system, and so for them to label my little heart attack as mental health, I'm like, so anyway, we'll get past that. But I wanted to say that I had this, I was living in this little town in southern Minnesota. I almost went back to that town, and I didn't because I had a car accident and I got displaced and I couldn't get back there in time for the housing. But I'm glad. I'm glad because really the town didn't like me, it didn't accept me, it didn't want me, and she kept sabotaging me by every time she'd have an open housing, it would always be open when I didn't have money. And so I think she did that deliberately. And so then I'm very frustrated with all these people. So it was a bad place for me to go. It was just a place for me to land to get me out of the state of Iowa and into another state. But, it's probably best that it worked out that I didn't go there. So here's what happened. And when I moved in, I had some support from people, but honestly, it ended very quickly. And what I found out was I moved into a HUD apartment building. Well, there was only one of them in town, and everybody knew what it was, and everybody judged everybody that lived there. All the better people in town all judged the people that lived there. So all you had to do was give your address, and you'd be discriminated against. It was a given, and we all knew it, and it kind of set us against the town, or I felt it did. And the police weren't very nice to people that lived in my building. Certainly, they got to be not very nice to me, and it was uncomfortable. It was hugely uncomfortable. When I went into the building, it was such a kind of a gross building that when I got my apartment, I just sat out and cried and said, oh my God, they put me in a nursing home, because it was a converted nursing home. It still looked like one. And that was the last place I wanted to be. And I had not seen it. I took it sight unseen, which was a really bad idea. Anyway, I really, to be honest with you, I had a better place in Iowa because it looked like an actual home. And that's what I actually need. But anyway, yeah, these institutional looking places, these are not okay for me. I don't like them. I don't get along with them. I'm not okay with them. They make me feel really creeped out, and that's how that was. And I lived there, but I didn't do well there. So anyway, I did stay for almost a year, not quite. Um, and I went to the ER a few times. I was doing a lot of ER visits back then because I just was frustrated. Medically, I was not feeling well, and that was actual truth. Um, from before I got the housing, I was in my car a lot, therefore, that did create a lot of pain. So I did have serious pain. And then I was trying to work with the Mayo system then, which is part of what they hang over my head now. It's been quite a few years, and things have changed, and I'm not the same at all. Never mind about that. And they just hung that over my head, and oh, it's gross. But anyway, they weren't helping me. They really weren't. And the town, like if I went to the ER, the ER was not Mayo. It was another system, but anyway, the town would see your address in the ER, and you would not be treated right. That's how it was. And I was starting to get very upset. But one night I felt really terrible, and I had a lot of low back pain. I had a lot of hip pain. Most of it was back and hip related pain. There was some in my shoulders, and I couldn't figure it out. It was really bad, and I knew it wasn't correct, and really was concerning to me. Um, but I thought, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I just couldn't put my finger on it. But something seemed really wrong. So I went to the ER, and it was 30 below. It was in the middle of the winter. And anyway, they didn't have a doctor. Their doctor had to drive from a long distance, I guess. And that pissed him off. And they weren't very nice to me at all when I first came in. And like I said, they saw my address, and I immediately got crap. They would even state that to you. They even say it to you. It was awful. And so I kind of knew they weren't running the right test. They weren't doing the right thing. I kind of knew it. And so the doctor came in, and basically they were like, crybaby, go home. And I walked out of the ER in tears because I thought, but something's really wrong, and they haven't helped me, and what's going to happen? So I had been in the Mayo system. And even in bad systems, sometimes you might find somebody good. And so I called the triage nurse. Well, she talked to me, and I said, well, they said it's just me, and I'm just a crybaby, and blah, blah, blah. And she says, no, talk to me about your symptoms. Tell me more. And I was telling her more, and she said, no, you need to get some care somewhere. And I said, well, I'm not going back to those assholes over here that won't do anything. I said, they were scary. And so she said, well, where's the next hospital? And I went, well, I guess, I said, there's one in Iowa. I don't know too much about it, but I know it's not too far away. And then the next one would be, I think, a lot further. So she said, well, can you go there? She says, call an ambulance and get them to take you there. Well, ambulances are not good at this. A lot of them won't take you where you request. And so, got to be careful about that. And so they said, no, we're going to take you to the closest one, which was theirs. And they certainly wouldn't take me over a state line. And I refused to go. And then a deputy sheriff showed up, and he tried to force me. And I finally said, get lost. And I ran back into my apartment. And I didn't know if they'd bother me or what, but they didn't. They left. And so I called this triage nurse back, and I said, I can't get there. I don't know. She says, well, can you drive? And I went, well, yes, I can drive. I don't have a heater that works. My heater wasn't working. It was 30 below. I'm not kidding. It was 30 below. It was a lot of snow, too. And she said, well, if you can get yourself there at all, do it. And I was like, all right. So I had to ask directions on the way. And I felt terrible. This whole time I'm in a lot of pain. I'm feeling horrible. So I get to drive myself. It was probably, I'm trying to think, 25, 30 miles maybe, which in driving isn't bad. But over down the highway, out into the rural area, over the state line. Isn't this wonderful when you're having a heart attack? And so I did that and arrived in this little town in Iowa and this little hospital. And I walked in and I said, well, and I kind of told them the story. And I don't even remember if I sat down very long at all. And they had me immediately in there, and they immediately started taking blood and different things. And so a number of things began to unfold. First of all, when they took my blood, they were trying to put it into syringes, and my blood didn't look like, I mean, I've seen my blood many times. It looked thick, like motor oil or something, very thick. And I was like, wow, you know. So I said, and then I said the stupid thing that everybody says that's really kind of stupid. Is that my blood? Well, they just got a needle and they just took it out, and I saw them do it, and you know, but that's what you say. So yes, that's your blood. And I was like, wow, you know. And so that was creepy. And then pretty soon, here comes the nitro tablet to put under my tongue, and I went, okay, they're putting nitro under my tongue. That means heart. And so then I began to get a little on the scared side. So then they came in and they were like, we don't want to scare you, but, and of course, when they lead with that, they're about to scare you. But you are having a heart incident, and we're going to transfer you by ambulance to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I was like, you know, it's like, you're gonna what? And then I said, what about my car? And I was always so protective in my car, because my car was a lot of my survival. And so unfortunately I don't have it now, and it is a problem. It is a big problem for me. But anyway, I was always so protective of it. And I was like, well, what about my car? And they said, your car will be fine. You can leave it here. We'll watch over it. It'll be fine. And I was like, okay. So they load me in the ambulance, and I had a very extremely uncomfortable trip to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I can't remember if they tried to start an IV, and I can't remember if they did or not, because sometimes I don't even let them do it. Because, long story, I had chemo many years ago. They didn't use a port. They ruined my veins, and I don't stick well. And it's a lot of pain and suffering for me, so sometimes I'm like, demons, back off, you know. Well, anyway, I don't remember if they did that or not, but they got me there, and oh gosh, I don't remember the ER that much. Kind of don't. I know I went to the ER, and then they did admit me, and they did put me in a room, and the thing that I really remember is probably the next day, or I don't remember if it was the next day. You know what? A lot of this is very vague, but I do remember that they were going to do an angiogram, and I'd never had one, and I just told him, if you're going to do this, make sure I'm out. And he said, you'll be fine. And so anyway, I got through it, and I got through it okay. I don't remember the procedure. I don't even know if I remember. I guess I remember going there for it. I don't know. A lot of it's, wow, funny how you block things out. But I remember being back for it, and I remember everything from that time on. And, you know, I talked to a bunch of people. I think there was a chaplain that came and talked to me. And then it was like, then they came and they told me that I'd had something called Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, what it was. The word Takotsubo means octopus trap. And so the heart assumes the shape of an octopus trap. There's a lot more to it that I'm not prepared to talk about when I'm ready to rush out to work. I might put some links in. If I don't, I might see if I can put a quick link or two in about it. But anyway, it is also called broken heart syndrome. And so a lot of people get it when they lose their spouse or something. They've been married many years and they're in great grief. So kind of the conclusion was that it was the stress and the grief of me losing my teaching position and my students and the big change in my life and everything I was going through that kind of caused it. And so yeah, they almost made a direct link back to what happened to me at the schools in Montana, because I had a principal that didn't like me, cut me down, and they pretty much linked it to that. And the things that happened after that. So anyway, that's what happened there. And then I had a hard time. They didn't want to give me support to get me back home because I had been in 3 states that night. So I'd been in Minnesota, Iowa, and South Dakota. But somebody somewhere, I can't remember, finally gave me a ride back to Iowa, and I got my car and went back myself. And I was on different medicines and blood thinners and different things. And the funny thing is when I went to Mayo this time, they had a list of these medications that I'd been on several years ago and wasn't on anymore, and had it like I was actively taking them. And I went, and anyway, got that corrected. But that was dumb. And so anyway, that's how that went. And so Minnesota dropped the ball on my health care that night. Iowa did admirably. In fact, Iowa, they told me later that when I was in the ER, they were in conversation with, this was a cardiac unit in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So they were in conversation with them. And so they had guidance from them. So that was good. And so I was quite impressed with the Iowa ER and everything that unfolded after that. But yeah, Minnesota, the little town in Minnesota, their ER sucked.